Welcome to the complete guide to wheel pose or urdhva dhanurasana. I'm Jenny and this is Travis, and we are the co-founders of Strength for Yoga. And we thought we'd take a little time today to look in depth at wheel pose and look at its anatomy and biomechanics, as well as some modifications that can make wheel pose a little more accessible. So, do you think we should start by talking about some anatomy of wheel?
Sure. Would you like to demonstrate your
Yes,
lovely wheel
yes,
pose
I
for us?
would.
So, wheel pose, I think, it's one of our quintessential backbends, and also maybe the biggest backbend from the standpoint of how much spinal extension, awesome, as well as shoulder flexion and hip extension and strength that it requires, both for the upper body, or especially for the upper body, and for the lower body. So,
Absolutely. So that makes it challenging, right?
right.
Yeah.
It's challenging for me, and I think for you too. Although you
Yes, it is.
have a
I
very
work
beautiful wheel.
hard to do that.
Yeah,
Um,
requires a little bit of warm up. So we mentioned the big anatomical demands from a flexibility standpoint are spinal extension,
so like yeah,
arching the back, shoulder flexion,
which is this,
hip extension, and
this,
I think that's probably thoracic extension. I
um,
mean, it's full spine.
wrist extension.
Oh yeah, wrist extension as well. So you have to be able to make sure that you can tolerate bending that wrist back.
Right. This is
And
a lot. Sorry.
yeah, all the joints, right? And then from a strength standpoint, shoulder pushing strength. So shoulder flexion, which is like the joint action to raise your arms up overhead.
Because you
You're
start here,
pushing your body away from the floor.
and there's also
Also,
yeah.
yeah, at the elbow to assist with that tricep extension. So straightening the arm from that bent position. And then hip extension, which is mostly glutes and some quads and some low back extension as well. So erector spinae, but definitely quads for knee extension.
Right.
So in the lower body, basically all the muscles are working.
It's like a whole body pose.
Right. So that isn't always, not all of those things are readily available to people right away, especially the strength, but also even some of the flexibility demands.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, because it has so many requirements, both mobility and strength, like what are some ways that people might, some strategies for making the pose, like making some adjustments to make the pose a little more accessible?
Yeah. So just, on the mat, no props or anything like that. I think that one of the things that holds people back is the directive that you have to be aligned in a very particular fashion, right?
Right. Like,
Yeah, so the instruction is usually like hands are right outside the shoulders, fingers are pointed straight down at the mat, toes are straight ahead and about hip width apart, would you say? Or
yeah.
shoulder width, somewhere in between. And especially like the straight ahead, like, oh, it's got to be these
Yeah,
nice
everything
straight
has to be in
lines.
these parallel lines. That's
Yeah.
that's the traditional
Right.
alignment. Yeah.
But anatomically, everybody's hip structure, shoulder structure is a little bit different. And so I think that if you found that maybe setting up with your feet a little bit wider, or your toes flared out, or your hands a little bit wider and maybe not totally pointed down at the bottom of the
Yeah, like
mat,
straight.
like any of that would be totally acceptable to get you into the pose if that feels easier and more
Yeah,
accessible.
I'm gonna show some feet wider and turned out,
Sure.
just as a good like demo, and also because in the yoga world we tend to be taught that that's incorrect. Like we have another YouTube video where we talk about this as a yoga myth, but there, like Travis said, these ideas that in order to practice wheel, the feet must be parallel and hip width, and that's it. And if they're wide or turned out, that's supposed to be really bad. Like it's supposed to be injured. Yeah, red X. Yeah, that's what we're taught. But if you look to like the strength and conditioning world or the fitness world, like how is that? What insights might we have from that?
Yeah, it's kind of like the same thing with the squat.
And I'm
like
gonna just demo it, by the way, while you're talking.
in a strength and conditioning textbook, they might say, "Oh, your feet have to be shoulder width apart and flared out 30 degrees," or maybe even they say straight ahead. And it's like,
But
well,
look at my feet here.
yeah, your feet are wide, your toes are flared, and your wheel looks great. And how does that feel?
And it feels great. And yeah, I think I'm one of those people who I have like a hip structure where maybe like a little more width and space there in my feet helps me feel more spacious and
Hmm.
well. So
And this will be totally blasphemous, but you could even have one foot pointed straight ahead and one foot pointed out. That's fine to like whatever shape that your feet make that's comfortable to you is
yes.
perfectly
And
fine.
I think I interrupted you and sorry, but you were talking about a squat and how it's kind of similar, right? Where
Yeah, yeah.
sometimes we're taught we should squat,
Hmm.
feet pointed forward and hip distance, but many people, if they let the feet turn out
Yeah.
and the feet go
And
wider, it's better for
and I
them.
would say like that would carry over exactly to this pose because it's basically the same, like the lower body
Yeah,
is effectively doing a squat
right,
or
right.
standing up from a squat statically.
Yes. So maybe like if we could kind of sum up that particular tip for making wheel pose a little more accessible, might just be to allow yourself some freedom from those like strict alignment rules that we're taught that really, want to line the body up in these straight lines and right angles. But let's like maybe liberate ourselves from those rules that keep us in these tight movement boxes and realize if we open ourselves up to more possibilities, we might find more easeful poses.
I think
So
that's a great succinct
yes.
take to it.
Yeah, and everybody's different, like you said, we're all different. So some people, wheel might be more easeful in that traditional alignment,
Sure.
but yeah, for others maybe. So
Yeah.
if you try to go wider, but then you're like, that doesn't actually feel better, then don't do that.
Try to go narrower.
Yeah,
Yeah. Experiment.
and same thing with I demoed feet. I'm probably not going to demo the hands, but you could experiment with your hands wider. They don't have to be like just the
Hmm.
slightly wider than like they could go wider. That might make more room for your shoulders if shoulder flexion
Yeah. And I also
is
think
tricky.
sometimes the triceps feel stronger if you allow them to flare
Yeah.
out a little bit. So placing your hands in different positions could assist with that.
Yeah, and don't you think I'm going off on a little tangent here, but with the tricep thing and we might have a little more strength here, isn't
Hmm.
that similar to like a push-up chaturanga or even a bench press
Right. So
where
all of this also applies to every pose, basically.
all
But
those like
yeah,
pushing
in
poses.
particular, when we're talking about chaturanga, they say, oh, you have to have your elbows
Yeah, that's what
in.
we're taught. We have to do
But
this.
most people tend to be stronger actually if they let their
Stronger like
elbows flare
this.
away, like not fully tucked, but maybe like if you were looking above and kind of you would make an arrow, elbows with the torso. So,
Right. So just allowing a little more freedom. So it works in push-ups. It works in the bench press
mhm,
if you're doing that strength exercise, and it works in wheel because that's overhead. It's pushing, but it's overhead
right.
overhead position. So cool. That's like our tip number one is allow yourself to experiment with your alignment and find out what's best for your body.
Mhm.
But we have a couple other two more tips,
Two
right?
more
Or
tips.
three more
Three
tips.
more tips. Two of them are sort of the same.
Yeah.
The second and third tips are using blocks to allow you to have more access to the pose. And you can do this in two ways, either putting your hands on the blocks or putting your feet on the blocks. The reason that this works, or the way that it helps, is that it requires less spinal extension because one
Hmm.
side of the body, it doesn't matter whether it's the hands or the feet, are higher up. So you don't have to come all the way down, and it allows you not to go into quite as much extension. Still a lot of extension, but a
I
little
feel
less.
like I totally have more room with my feet up on the
You can
blocks.
even talk to me in this position
Yeah,
comfortably.
exactly.
Jenny's showing it here
Oh.
with the feet on the blocks, and we like to have the blocks at a wall. It's not the end of the world if you don't have a wall, but it is the most guaranteed avoidance of
Of the
the
block
block
slipping.
sliding. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So as long as your mat has good friction and it's not slipping, like just test that out
Yeah,
before you try it, or don't even worry about that and put the blocks on a wall.
in my personal practice, my mat is sticky. So when I use the blocks under my feet, I do just do it in the middle of the room on the mat. But super safe would be to have them at the
Yeah,
wall.
we're setting a good example.
Exactly. So that was feet on the blocks. And then we have another option to make wheel more accessible, which is hands on the
Yep.
blocks. But for this one, what's great to do, and this really works best if you have like a
What is
little
that
lip,
called? Yeah,
whatever, I forget what this thing is. Baseboard, baseboard.
that's it.
A little lip so that you can angle the blocks.
Hmm.
And this is because of the angle of wrist extension that's required. If you check it out. If the block was just flat and not angled, and then I wanted to place my hand here, I have to come into
Yeah, you could actually
more.
do it. I tried it. Can't do
Yeah, it wouldn't work for, I could do it, but
it.
Travis, yeah,
You have a lot of wrist extension.
right. But not everybody has that much, and you
Right.
have to do more if you elevate like that. But if you angle the blocks, that allows you to press up without needing that extra wrist extension because it kind of
Hmm.
matches your body. So I've got the blocks, shoulder distance a little wider than shoulder
I
distance.
think the
Do you think?
right block could be more on the lip.
Oh,
There you go.
hey.
You're ready.
Thanks for noticing that. Yeah.
Safety first.
So two angled blocks for my hands, and then it's just the same thing, but I'll just show it.
Yeah, you have to obviously play with the placement, like we just talked about how wide.
Right, because we're all a little different.
Hmm.
But hands there,
Oh, that looks so good.
and then you press up, and
How does that feel?
it feels great.
Our fourth and final wheel modification is a modification where we use a resistance band, which might sound surprising because a resistance band might sound like it's going to make it harder. But what
Right?
we do with the band is we use it to assist our wheel. And we do that by hanging the band from a pull-up bar. So just at the right level where when you go up into wheel, the band is stretching an appropriate amount, where when the band stretches, it wants to compress. So it is assisting you in your wheel, and you go into the band with the band around your torso. And so now the band, you're in wheel, the band is pulling up on your lower back and it's offloading you. It's making you weigh less effectively so that it doesn't require quite as much strength. And it's actually pulling you up into extension, which is right where that like you get a little help into that stretch.
Right. So that could be a really great option as well. So, yeah, so of all the modifications, just to summarize what we offered here, would be check in with your alignment and maybe be open to breaking those traditional yoga alignment rules that might help you. And then the blocks under your feet or blocks under your hands, or the resistance band assistance when you attach it from above.
Mhm.
So those are our suggestions. And this has been our complete guide to wheel pose. If you appreciated this content, subscribe to my channel so that you can stay up to date on all of the tips that I share.